Here's a long, cinematic English story based on the title, Mansory Tried to Prove Me Wrong. I didn't go looking for a fight with Mansory. Honestly, I expected the usual story. Loud carbon fiber, wild colors, extreme designs that scream for attention more than respect. I had already formed my opinion long ago. Mansory doesn't build cars for drivers, they build cars for shock value. Or so I thought. Then one build landed right in front of me, and everything I believed was challenged. The assumption. Mansory has always been controversial. For every fan who calls their work bold, there's a critic who calls it too much. I was firmly in the second group. In my mind, Mansory was about excess. Too much carbon fiber, too many sharp angles, too much drama, not enough soul. I believed true automotive art was about balance, power and restraint, aggression and elegance. Mansory, to me, ignored that balance completely. And then they tried to prove me wrong. The first look. The car stood still, but it felt alive. Every panel was redesigned, every surface intentional. The carbon wasn't there just to shine, it followed the lines of the car, exaggerating its muscle instead of hiding it. The stance was wider, lower, more planted. This wasn't chaos, this was control. I walked around it slowly, expecting to find the moment where it all fell apart, the point where design turned into noise. But it never came. Instead, I noticed something unexpected. Restraint. Power with a purpose. Under the hood, Mansory did what they're famous for. More power, more torque, more presence. But this time, it wasn't reckless. The tuning felt calculated, engineered for dominance rather than headlines. Acceleration wasn't just brutal, it was smooth. The exhaust didn't scream, it commanded. This wasn't a car begging for attention. It was a car confident enough to let silence do half the talking. And that's when I realized something uncomfortable. I had underestimated them. The interior changed everything. Inside, I expected overload, bright colors, aggressive patterns, unnecessary details. Instead, I found craftsmanship, hand-stitched leather, carbon accents placed with intention, Alcantara where your hands naturally rest. The cabin felt like a private jet built for someone who knows exactly what they want. Luxury wasn't shouting here, it was whispering. This wasn't just customization, this was identity. The moment of truth. Driving it erased my last doubts. The car didn't feel heavy despite the added presence. Steering was precise. The chassis felt tighter than stock, more confident at speed. Mansory hadn't just changed how the car looked, they had changed how it behaved. This wasn't a fashion statement, it was a performance statement. And that's when it hit me. They didn't prove me wrong, they evolved. Mansory didn't try to convince me with marketing or hype, they let the car do the talking. What I saw wasn't a brand desperate to shock, it was a brand that had matured. One that understood its critics and chose to respond not with noise, but with refinement. They didn't abandon their DNA, they refined it. Boldness became confidence. Excess became precision. Controversy became character. Final thought. I still believe Mansory isn't for everyone, but now I understand something I didn't before. Mansory isn't trying to please the world, they're building cars for people who refuse to blend in. And now they're doing it with intelligence, performance, and purpose. I went in ready to criticize. I walked away impressed. And yes, Mansory tried to prove me wrong. And this time, they succeeded. Rocket, fire. All right, let's go much deeper, slower, and more cinematic. This is a fully expanded documentary-style story, built to feel emotional, reflective, and powerful. Mansory tried to prove me wrong. I didn't just doubt Mansory, I dismissed them. For years, their name meant one thing in my mind: excess without emotion. Cars that were louder than they were meaningful. Machines built to dominate Instagram feeds rather than highways. I respected engineering, heritage, and balance, and Mansory to me stood on the opposite side of that philosophy. So when people told me, you need to see what Mansory's doing now, I smiled politely and moved on. Until I couldn't. The weight of a prejudice. The automotive world has long memories. Brands build reputations slowly, and they break them even slower. Mansory had become a symbol, whether fair or not, of going too far, too aggressive, too dramatic, too unapologetic. And I believe that symbol without question. In my head, a Mansory car was already finished before I ever saw it. Carbon everywhere, sharp edges screaming for attention, luxury drowning in ego, performance numbers chasing shock value rather than driver confidence. I thought I knew the story. That was my mistake. The encounter that changed everything. Seeing the car in person was unsettling, not because it was outrageous, but because it wasn't. Yes, it was bold. Yes, it was unmistakably Mansory, but there was something else underneath the visual aggression. Discipline. Every line served a purpose. Every aerodynamic element wasn't just for drama, it followed airflow logic, visual harmony. Mansory hadn't softened their voice, they had learned how to speak clearly. And that's when I confused. Understanding the philosophy. That's when I realized something important. Mansory was never trying to be subtle. They were trying to be honest. Honest about power. Honest about presence. Honest about individuality. In an industry obsessed with playing it safe, Mansory chose discomfort. They built cars for people who didn't want approval. They wanted expression. And now that expression had grown up, where performance became personal. Then came the numbers. More horsepower, more torque, faster acceleration. But what mattered wasn't how extreme the figures were, it was how they were delivered. Power came on smoothly, relentlessly, without chaos. The exhaust didn't scream, it commanded. This wasn't brute force, it was authority. Throttle response felt sharpened, not nervous. The exhaust note had depth, not just volume. An engineered sound designed to communicate strength, not desperation. Mansory hadn't built a monster, they had built a leader. The interior where I lost my argument. If the exterior challenged my bias, the interior destroyed it completely. This was not overload, this was curation. Every surface told a story of human hands and intentional choices. Stitching patterns flowed with the cabin design. Materials changed exactly where your senses needed them to. Leather, carbon, and Alcantara didn't compete, they collaborated. The cabin didn't feel like a modified car, it felt like a private space. A place designed around the owner, not the audience. A reminder that true luxury isn't loud, it's personal. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected inside a Mansory build. Respect. Driving away from old beliefs. Driving it was the final test. I expected drama. I prepared for intimidation. What I got instead was composure. At speed, the car felt stable, planted, deliberate. Mansory hadn't just changed how the car looked, they had changed how it behaved. This wasn't a fashion statement, it was a performance statement. And that's when it hit me. They didn't prove me wrong, they evolved. Mansory didn't try to convince me with marketing or hype, they let the car do the talking. What I saw wasn't a brand desperate to shock, it was a brand that had matured, one that understood its critics and chose to respond not with noise, but with refinement. They didn't abandon their DNA, they refined it. Boldness became confidence. Excess became precision. Controversy became character. Closing thought. I still believe Mansory isn't for everyone, but now I understand something I didn't before. Mansory isn't trying to please the world. They're building cars for people who refuse to blend in. And now they're doing it with intelligence, performance, and purpose. I went in ready to criticize. I walked away impressed. And yes, Mansory tried to prove me wrong. And this time, they succeeded. Rocket, fire.